Hello there, Internet, and welcome to episode 79 of Funny Books Splatter, a horror comics podcast brought to you by HorrorTalk.com. I am your host, James Ferguson. This week, I've got a packed house for you. Greg Smith, Michael Tanner, and Zach Lehner are here to talk about their young adult horror series, Junior Braves of the Apocalypse, from Oni Press. The comic follows a group of scouts as they return from a camping trip to find a zombie apocalypse has decimated their hometown. The second volume, Out of the Woods, just dropped this week. Quick note on the audio for the show, we had some technical difficulties getting Zach connected, but we figured it out a few minutes after we started chatting. We could see Zach, but we could not hear him. That's why we get so excited when he chimes in all of a sudden. You can find more about Junior Braves of the Apocalypse at their official site, juniorbraves.com. Also, facebook.com/juniorbraves65, at juniorbraves65 on Twitter, and at juniorbraves on Instagram. Look Alive 65. Zach can be found online on Instagram at LehnerZach. Greg can be found on Twitter at ThatAmazingTwit. And Michael can be found on Twitter at MikeIsErnie. In other news, I recently posted the latest Loot Crate unboxing videos to the Horror Talk YouTube channel. I filmed these with my two kids, and they are increasingly out of control. In the newest one, my 3-year-old tries to slit my throat with a plastic scalpel repeatedly. Gets a little nuts. Check them out, and subscribe to the channel for more of these unboxing videos and other content as well. Alright, that is it for the housekeeping this week. Now, without further ado, here is episode 79 of Funny Books Splatter with my guests, Greg Smith, Michael Tanner, and Zach Lehner. Okay. Alright, so Zach, you're in this group or whatever. So if you we can see you.
Oh,
hi.
I see him.
Hey, we can see you. We're gonna have to interpret what you tell us.
Arm to hold up signs like he's Bob Dylan.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Oh. I thought we were gonna play guess that shit.
Yeah, it'll be charades with everything. This will be the most interesting episode of a podcast ever, where we have to rely on visual cues for it.
Well, that's what we do. See, Mike and I do the words. Zach does the images. The visuals. He does the visuals.
So to start us off, the way I like to start the show is really to kind of ask you to pitch the book. So if you had to explain to someone walking by on a convention floor, or stuck in an elevator or something, how would you describe Junior Braves of the Apocalypse to someone?
I like to describe it as a young adult survival horror graphic novel series about the Junior Braves, who are an outdoor wilderness group like the Boy Scouts, but not the Boy Scouts. Book one. What was that, Greg?
Just reasons.
Yeah, we don't want to get the Boy Scouts suing you. All right, understood.
Yeah. They're litigious. So book one centers on them having gone on this wonderful week-long camping trip and then returning to their small town, and the zombie mutant apocalypse has happened. And book two picks up almost immediately afterward as they continue their journey searching for their lost families.
And how old are the kids that are in the book? Like their age range with some of those?
They range from 8 to 12 and a half.
Mm-hmm.
About to turn 13, I guess is the best way.
Yeah, so kids out in the wilderness, just another reason why I never want to go out in the woods. It's you never know what's going to happen while you're at home, clearly, because the zombie apocalypse could happen while you're away, I guess.
Yeah, and I don't want to be in the woods with a bunch of kids.
Yeah, that too.
Because kids are dangerous.
They are.
I saw the first volume described as Goonies meets The Walking Dead. Is that something you're still leading into, or is that kind of moved away from a description?
It's the easiest shorthand to kind of describe it for people. I always like to say when people come up to the table at conventions, when they talk about age range or appropriateness, I always like to say it's for kids who have either already read The Walking Dead or are not allowed to read Walking Dead.
That's a good descriptor, yeah, because it's all right, that is a specific age range.
Yeah.
They got that hunger for it, but they just can't get their hands on it.
Can I interrupt for a second?
Yes!
Can you guys hear me?
Zach, we can hear you! Woo!
Oh my gosh!
Success!
Oh!
Thank you, God. Oh my goodness.
It's a little tinny. I don't know if you can do anything about
that.
Can
you just adjust the bass of the treble?
Or should we just count our blessings?
Out of the bar from the Tetons and tried to set all this up. So
no, we're
sorry,
good. We're
guys.
good.
I'm so sorry.
Well, we're glad you're in the
Sorry.
room. We got you. Welcome.
Hey, he's here.
All right.
Yes.
Continue.
Well, is there anything else you'd like to add in terms of the descriptor there, or are you in a good place for that?
No, Mike and Greg are pretty dead on. Like we've all been doing this for a couple of years now. Like I think we're all on the same page about what the book is, and they certainly know how to pitch it well.
Cool. And I think the first volume you guys had released was digitally first, each chapter, then you had a graphic novel. This one, it seems like it's going just straight to graphic novel. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the digital release was only a little bit ahead of the print release.
Why the change? Like, was that a good experience, a bad experience, indifferent, or is there why make the jump just to graphic novel instead of the digital?
Oh, it was always just one full graphic novel, and the breaking it up into different quote unquote issues for digital was just done only for digital. It was always one full volume.
Right. That's how it was produced originally.
Yeah, so, is that the plan, I guess, for just like full graphic novels moving forward?
Yes.
Yeah, for the full series.
It's a kind of a unique approach in that case. Is there I guess why go the graphic novel route and not more of like the single issue route?
Well, I honestly, when Greg and I first pitched it several years ago, we did pitch it as a series. And our original outline was structured very much as individual issues. Mm-hmm. But the realities are that it's an easier sell from a creative team of pretty much unknowns to do a solid graphic novel, like a full graphic novel, rather than risk individual issues. Mm-hmm. So we did and you'll kind of see it more, I think, from volume 2 onward, is it's structured more as a big book, where volume 1 is a little episodic, and that's a holdover from our original pitch and our original outline. But, it's just economically, it makes more sense to gamble with a big, nice, hardcover, thick, 200-page volume, than to do individual issues on a monthly basis.
Yeah, that's what I'm sorry, go ahead.
It also works a little bit better for some of the markets we've ended up working in. Like, we sell to a lot of libraries, we do a lot of work with schools, and they want something that they can put on a shelf. Mm-hmm. Like they want something kind of like put there and have kids like pick up and read in one go. We're weirdly not really in the traditional comic book market in that way, and the big book is both like the cause of and a response to that simultaneously.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's also one of those things too where like a librarian or a teacher can put this big book in a kid's hand and pull the bait and switch where a kid thinks like, oh great, they just gave me a giant book to read, and then they flip that thing open and the first thing they see is a really beautiful comic, and then they got zombie monsters that are like chasing people around, and it's like, wait, I get to read this? This is what you want me to read? Okay, I'll do this.
Yeah, like what's the trick?
Yeah, there's a big shift. Yeah, there's a big shift with librarians and teachers where it used to be kind of this kind of nose up in the air attitude towards comics, but now they just want kids to be reading. So Junior Braves is one of those great books that is a good kind of transition book, they call it. So a kid who might be reluctant to pick up, a 200-page like novel, even if it's a middle reader or a young adult book, if you give them a 200-page graphic novel, they'll read that, they'll spend some time with it, then they'll get into longer comics or get into longer prose. So it's a good, we're the gateway drug of fiction.
That's great. So it's from a setup standpoint, it sounds like you're in a right spot from your target audience. Like you've kind of done the research to understand what you're looking for.
Well, we like that.
Yes, research.
I'm sorry, I had to step away for just 1 sec, guys. Would you mind saying that again? I didn't hear you.
I said, "Oh yes, research."
Well,
Yes.
what I mean by that is like you kind of like you looked at who this book is meant for and said like, okay, like where are they? How are they getting to the book? Are they like they're not going to a regular traditional comic book shop? They're getting books from libraries and that kind of stuff. Like, are you able to get into like the Scholastic Book Fair or something like that?
Oh, we would love it if that happened. We haven't yet, but that would be amazing.
Yeah, I mean that would definitely be awesome to do.
I remember just like tearing through that catalog as a kid to just be, and that's something that's such like a good, like, all right, the books they cost money and everything obviously, but it's something that's like, your parents get excited because like, oh, the kid wants to read. Yeah, okay, buy all the Goosebump books. Go ahead, just.
Yes, right. You sit down, you read all those Goosebump books, you get your pizza at the end, you're like, yes,
book it. All right. But I guess like not everyone sets out to make a young adult or teen oriented horror story. So this is kind of like a sweet spot there, I guess. How did you settle on that particular kind of target for something like the Junior Braves, or was it like something where it could have gone either way? It could have gone more of a younger audience or an older audience?
Oh man, it could have gone either way, but I think it also like when Mike and I you go back to like the roots of like how Mike and I met and hanging out when we were younger in college. It's like we bonded over just this kind of stuff.
Yeah, we really wanted to do something that we wanted to explore a genre that isn't really being done, which is kind of kids adventure, which is not skewed young, but is a little bit older, but also there's not a lot of young adult horror that isn't also slightly romantic. I mean, we're living in a post Twilight world. So we just really wanted to hit like what we would have loved at that kind of delicate age of not quite teenagers, too old for the kid stuff. Like our big influences would be like the Goonies or Monster Squad, which is that kind of middle ground where the kids can swear a little, but they're still kids. And really like doing horror for that genre was just something we really wanted to do. And it's not something that there's a lot of out there, even now.
Yeah. And like just in the kind of writing that we would read when we were younger too, like the Christopher Pike and the Fear Street style books, where you got kids that are put into like these more of an adult type situation that you would normally not see a kid having to survive through, and that's kind of what we wanted to throw these kids into and show their resilience and their ability to push through.
Well, that adds to the relatability of it then too, of the audience. So you're getting a tween or teenager who's interested in reading, and it's like, oh, like I've been a Boy Scout or a litigiously not named Scout, and saying like, okay, like this is I could see like what would have happened if that last camping trip I came back to find a bunch of zombie apocalypse that happened in my city or whatever. Like that's terrifying stuff to think of.
Yeah.
And that adds to the relatability aspect, and honestly, what I think makes for better horror stories in general is the idea of like putting yourself in that character's shoes. So when you see, I mean, there's the group of the Junior Braves is kind of has like anyone could find themselves in any of the characters. Like there's someone for every single person, it seems, in that group. It's diverse. It's got a little bit of everybody in there. So it's like, okay, like you'll find someone to identify with from a personality standpoint, or just from seeing yourself in a character. So that speaks to it. And then when you see that person get pushed around or get attacked by some sort of zombie monster, that's some terrifying stuff.
Definitely.
Yeah, like really kind of building out the Junior Brave, the Tribe 65. We wanted to look alive. We really wanted to kind of hit different archetypes and personalities, some pulling from real life and some pulling from like really kind of figuring out team dynamics. And then like Zach's designs for them really helped like us hone in on what beats to hit with characters. So it all kind of comes together, and like book 2 introduces even more characters that Zach has to design and draw.
Yeah, we're in the middle of that now, which is a lot of fun actually. But it's it's that same, when it comes to like telling the story of the characters through the way they stand and the way they move. Like there's a lot of, I spend a lot of time like acting things out in front of the mirror, like when thumbnailing, trying to like figure out how a character is going to like move or express themselves with their hands or with their body language. And I think, part of that is trying to find a way to make them relatable visually immediately to the reader so that they can see some of how they act or how people that they know act in them.
So is there a percentage of the characters that are taken from real life people that are in your life that are like, oh, this is that kid down the road, and I can't wait to design this one. That annoying kid down the block is gonna get hit by a rock in this one, so this is great.
For legal reasons, I think we have to say no.
Yeah, but I'm sure, like you said, everyone can read these stories and pick somebody out of here that they know or knows somebody that's like that character.
I can say, without naming names, that not a lot, but a couple of the characters, especially in the second book, are visually based, at least, on scouts that I knew in my troop growing up.
Oh, wow. That's a nice touch.
I'm not naming names for this thing, but...
Now, what about the monster side of it? So, Zach, can you speak about the design of that? Because these aren't like your traditional zombies. These are something else, and like I don't fully know what to call them, but they're definitely monstrous. What's that?
Being honest. Well, neither do we. We've kind of flipped between zombie and mutant a lot over the course of this project. In terms of the designs, when we started talking about this, we all kind of came together in terms of visuals on Left 4 Dead, on the video game series Left 4 Dead. In terms of like, all of the design in there, which is something that like, the folks at Valve really, I think, excelled at in that game, was this like, you saw a lot of different like shapes in a lot of different like silhouettes of like what the zombies looked like. And so every time, in the literature that Mike and Greg originally sent me, a big part of the design aesthetic of the zombies was like skin diseases.
Yeah. We sent a lot of links to like horrible skin diseases, elephantitis. Basically, if you had ever had a TLC documentary made about the hardships of your life, like the woman with the enormous legs, like just basically like any birth defect or deformity, just like sent to Zach, traumatize him, and really just like go wild. Like that's really like the mutation, the zombification, really is supposed to kind of erupt from inside of them. Rather than be like an external thing.
The other thing that I've tried to do with them, because like because we're working in like black and white and one color in every book, there's kind of a limit to how much I can do in terms of showing a skin disease, because so many skin diseases are about color as much as about texture in terms of how they look. This is not a thought that I think most people ever have to consider. I can like, between like the texture of the skin diseases and the Left 4 Dead thing, I also kind of try to make it look like these creatures have kind of been through a lot since whatever happened, so that like I try to give them a lot of like lacerations and a lot of like like the more dangerous ones have like marks on them. Like there is one zombie in book 2 that has very prominent scars all over its face. And like the whole, like just trying to show that they aren't all there anymore, and they're not necessarily going to think about their own safety when they try to do something.
Yeah, I'm just picturing now, like I recognize that as an artist for a horror comic, your Google search history must be just absolutely bizarre.
I'm definitely on the government watch list somewhere. It's not just like, it's not just the like, you know, all of the like gross stuff I have to look up. It's the fact that I'm drawing kids.
Oh.
So I'm like, all right, what is a 12-year-old holding a bat look like or something? And it's there's definitely like someone in the local police force kind of keeping an eye on my browsing history.
Well, at least like you have the proof to be like, no, like here is an actual book I made. I'm not just some creep. Like this is a thing I did. You want me to sign this for you? Like,
I like the idea of Zach signing copies for the local police force just to get them off his back.
Just to get out of like being harassed over my search history.
Take a copy.
Yeah, we're good. We're cool. Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Now, Zach, you had touched upon something I wanted to ask you guys about, which you're saying whatever happened happens. So, is this going to be something like The Walking Dead, where we don't know what caused all of this, or do you plan on revealing the kind of the catalyst for this zombie apocalypse throughout the series?
Guys.
I think we want to kind of straddle that a bit. We don't want to get bogged down with like having to explain to the audience, well, then this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened, and this is how it happens. But we also don't want to not address it in some ways. Mm-hmm. And you'll start to see, it'll start to come more to the forefront. It's peppered in book 2 and then becomes kind of more prominent. Yeah, in like book 3. But ultimately, it doesn't matter how it happened. Just that it happened.
That it happened.
But there's going to be we're going to give enough information that people can kind of figure out kind of how it spread so quickly, how it affected so much, and they'll get some answers of kind of like who is responsible.
Mm-hmm. I think the more fun that people have is the speculation conversations when they come up to our tables and bring their own theories as to what happened or why it happened. Currently, that's been, at least in my time with conversations with folks, is their conspiracy theories about after they've read the book and come back and they're like, oh, and then I think that this is what happened. Oh, okay, cool. Well, and they're like, oh, I really can't wait to see what happens in book number 2. So
it's funny in our original pitch, like our idea for the apocalypse was so over the top and insane that it kind of like, now in hindsight, I kind of understand why the editor kind of like had us dial it down. Because our original pitch was like, and then this happened, and then this catastrophe happened, and then this went off, and it was just like so much where it really did kind of leave us with the question, like, well, what the hell kind of world are we leaving for the kids at the end of it?
Yeah, but what's so weird though? That was like 8 years ago, and then look where we are now. I mean,
it's kind of funny. We won't go too much into it, but one of the ideas that Greg and I had that we kind of let go is something that actually I think is being used in another genre or another zombie game right now. And so I was like, oh, I'm glad we didn't do that, because this is beating us to market by years by the time we'd get to that reveal. But it's funny how when you're playing essentially you're playing with the same toys, just in a different sandbox, how you can kind of come up with similar stuff.
Yeah, I guess there's only like so many zombie stories you can think of. It's like, well, sooner or later someone's going to get to like, what did we say before? What were the things that you saw, Zach? The wood, something otter, the sea otter or something like that? I'm sorry. Before we got you online, we're like, oh, like they're gonna find a way for you to be able to draw an otter into a story, so that way you can expense your trip. But that'll be something that you can I guess there's only sooner or later. What I was getting at is sooner or later someone's gonna be like, yeah, and there should be a zombie version of that beaver. Like, yeah, like, well, that's what it'll do.
Well, no spoilers.
20 book splatter
book 2
exclusive.
introduces something new.
So, I guess, how long are you planning for the series? So book 2 is coming out right now, so are you planning this for, like, X amount of volumes? Do you have an end in sight?
We there's no end in sight. No, it's planned for 5 books, but this is going to be the next decade of our lives.
Yeah. Our first editor on this project, he joked with us that literally we would be working on this for decades, and we've already been at it for a decade, and we're looking at another decade. And we thought he was like blowing smoke up our butts because, that's just ridiculous. You don't work on something and you do.
That's comics. But I think with the way that you have this set up, like if you're able to turn that, like I guess it's mostly on Zach to an extent, right? In terms of how quickly he can draw the book. But if you're able to do this, like once a year or once every 18 months or something like that, you're at least staying in everyone's mindset with that thing. Okay, yeah, when's the next volume of Junior Brave so we can see this story through. So that way, like if you're able to get onto this kind of like routine, I guess you'll be in a good spot. So with book 2 coming out now, like the shitty interview question to ask is like, well, what else you got? Like, all right, you just spent all this time and apparently a decade of your life already to make 2. So when's the next one?
Well,
it's always funny because that's really kind of the way creative teams kind of work is like sometimes one side of it is waiting for the other. And now Zach is in the unfortunate position to be waiting on Greg and I because we decided to completely redo book 3 and add a bunch of new stuff. So we have to go back and rewrite book 3 before he can start drawing it. So that now he's waiting on us, but hopefully we'll be able to get him a finished script in the next few weeks. And then he gets to work, and then he's drawn book 3 and Greg and I are working on book 4, and hopefully the times will work out a bit better where he doesn't have to wait for so long to start working.
I mean, a little bit of waiting is fine.
Everyone needs a vacation.
Take your time. We're good. Yeah, you gotta bask in the light of a new book release and see everyone picking up the book and enjoying it. So, what has the response been to the book so far? The first volume's been out there for a bit. I mean, have you seen like cosplayers or anything at conventions, or are people making their own merit badges for the Junior Braves?
Not yet, but we're hoping.
Yeah,
we're hoping.
I do have, I do get to meet, like, I have repeat kids who come back. I'll say that. And that feels really good. I'll have kids who come up and like they're kind of shy. They don't want to talk, so their parents do the talking. And they they talk about how it's his favorite book. It's his favorite book, and that feels good. It's not a cosplay, but it's a connection with a person who I otherwise never would have met. Who kind of learned about me secondhand through this thing I made, which is that's the fun part. That's the reward of all of this.
Yeah, I always use the story of when Greg and I were at Rose City, I think in 2016, where we were sitting at the table selling the book. This couple came up. They're cosplaying, I think, Ash from The Evil Dead, and I forget what the wife was cosplaying.
She was, I want to say Addams Family. Wednesday, Addams Family.
Wednesday, Thursday from Addams Family. They came up, they kind of checked out the book. They're like, oh, we might like this. And our daughter might like it too. And we're like, oh, how old is your daughter? And like, oh, she's 8 years old. And we're like, oh, that might be a little too young for it. And they're like, nah, she's okay. So they buy it. And then the next day of the con, this little girl comes up to the table holding the book in both hands, just gripping it. And she looks at us and she says, I love this book. This is the best book ever written. And that is more, that's worth more than anything, right?
Yeah.
That kid loves that book. And hopefully, Greg and I will be at Rose City again this year, and hopefully she'll be back. And we'll see her now that she'll be 10 years old, and she'll get volume 2.
Yeah, that has to be worth more than a cosplay or anything like that, because you see having a kid, your intended audience resonate that, and that's something that can help shape a kid's life. That can turn that little girl into the next generation of horror creators out there by getting exposed to something like that.
Yes. Right? That's our hope. We want cool we want a cool experience for these kids. They can jump into it head first and come out of it and really enjoy the kind of stuff that really resonates and gets them loving fun reading, good horror, and when they're not too scared about it, they can enjoy it later on.
Now, did you have similar experiences or books that kind of shaped your creative energies like that growing up? Like, I mean, I know, speaking from my experience, I read Stephen King at way too young of an age, and that was like something that got me interested in the genre. And I feel that's something that seems to pop up a lot for creators in the horror field. Did you have something similar? Were you like a Goosebumps kid?
I'll go last because I have like an epic story. So if you two want to go first.
Zach?
So I'm the disappointing one because the truth is I didn't read a lot of horror as a kid. Like, and if I'm being honest, all the time that I've spent, like doing like illustration and comic stuff, horror isn't something I ever really sought out or saw myself doing. Like, I kind of just tripped into all of this, and it's just ended up being this huge project that like is a big part of my life now. So it's kind of interesting how Mike and Greg will make all these references to like horror films or ideas that or horror properties that I haven't seen or don't interact with much. And I kind of like all of the timing and the shot blocking, all the stuff in the book was a lot less to horror for me and a lot more to I'm trying to think of the best example. It owes a lot more to like old 90s cartoons more than anything else. I don't really have in terms of getting involved in the genre itself, I don't really have anything. Like, I'm having fun working in it, but it was all kind of an accident.
That's totally fine. I'm not going to be like, well, it's been nice talking to you, Zach. You can exit out the side. We're all good. Because what I will say, look, the horror genre, I found I wasn't a huge horror fan when I started writing for Horror Talk, and that was 8 years ago. And it's something I've grown to appreciate the genre, and I still what happens. Thank God I have an editor at Horror Talk, because what will happen frequently is I'll make some sort of bold statement and be like, no one's ever done something like this before, and he's like, actually, here's 7 movies that you haven't seen, jackass. This is absolutely has happened before, and it's a total trope of the genre. I'm like, oh, so I'm gonna revise what I said so I don't look like an idiot. So thanks a lot. But I think I've grown to really appreciate what the genre is capable of, and the sheer just kind of variety of it for that. So it's certainly not a an offensive statement or something like that. To be like, well, not really, I don't know, because that's totally fine, because there's just so much available to it. And I think on the fan side of it, horror fans tend to be the most open and I don't want to say forgiving, but just they're willing to try everything, especially in the indie scene, to try out a new book if it's something scary or at least looks like up that alley there.
I hope so.
All right, Greg, you got a story?
Yeah, so I grew up also reading Stephen King way too early. My mom big into King and a lot of Kuntz and stuff like that. So those books were always at the ready to be read, and I tore through a lot of literature. As soon as I was, I want to say probably 4th grade, probably just reading a bunch of that stuff. And between that and Christopher Pike books that I'd find at the library, when my mom was shelving books and stuff, I was just finding a lot of things that I wasn't probably should be reading at that early of an age. And I was going through old drawings of stuff, and boy, oh boy, I drew some pretty horrific, really terrible drawings the other day when I was going through some boxes of stuff. But and then my dad was big into a lot of horror movies and stuff like that, a lot of Romero stuff, and then Italian horror stuff. So I just watched a lot of movies with my dad growing up, and kind of things obviously like I think like visually I'd get freaked out, but also enjoyed it. My wife and I were just talking about how when I was a kid, my dad and I used to do a lot of haunted houses. Like my dad would put them on, and I'd always like to like go through and do all the fun like buildups of weird stuff with them and stuff. So yeah, being involved in the horror stuff is just I don't know, it's fun.
I do wonder if like the idea of reading those kind of Stephen King books or horror books at a too early of an age, if that's something that is unique to like this generation versus like the current, like my kids, I don't know, am I going to be too protective of them or more cognizant of what they're reading and ingesting when it comes to media? Because like my parents had no idea like what was in the Stephen King books. They're like, oh, he's reading. Yeah, okay, go ahead. Yes, you should read this book. Go ahead. They had no idea.
And it's a big book,
and
too.
It's like, but it was just the idea. Okay, he's reading. He's enjoying this. He's gonna read more of it. Go for it. So I do wonder now. Like, yeah, it's easy for me to take 2 seconds and look up what this book's about or what like a rating would be if it's age appropriate. So I have to wonder what like that next generation of possible creators could how they'll get into it, or if it's just going to be more parents like what you had apparently that just like let's share this. There's a way to enjoy this, but knowing like the kid, I think you could understand what a kid's threshold is for it. Like if the kid's going to get freaked out by like a loud noise, like maybe don't show them The Exorcist, but like there's ways to get in there.
I saw that way too young. I saw that at like I was sitting there thinking I saw Exorcist at like 5 or 6, like as soon as you could rent movies at a at a place. My mom rented The Exorcist and Nomads. We had a double feature. And I was like, these are very scary, but I watched them. And I
saw Exorcist really late. Like that was actually my first rental makeout movie with my girlfriend in high school.
Yeah, there's nothing that says nothing wants to make you nothing pushes out teenage hormones like an Exorcist. Yeah.
Oh yeah, it was not a pleasant makeout. But I know for me, sort of my origin story with it is in terms of reading, I didn't read much horror growing up. I've only read one Stephen King book, and that was in late high school, and it was Thinner, which is not considered one of the better Stephen King books, but that's the one I read. For me, it was mostly movies. When I was very young, my family went over to visit my uncle, and just sitting around his living room, and he had a movie on. And of course, they're all adults, and they're talking, and they're not really paying attention to the TV. But I'm the 6-year-old kid who is not involved in the adult conversation. So of course, I'm watching the TV, and I have this distinct, clear memory of seeing this kind of blue, green, gray zombie shambling out of a doorway and grabbing this woman and taking a huge bite out of her shoulder and this bright red blood. And that traumatized me. That made me the scaredy cat kid. Like I had to have a nightlight. Like I would sleep on the floor at the foot of my parents' bed. I was a scared kid. And then in high school, like we rented movies one night to stay up late. My friends and I are watching movies at like 4 a.m. There's like 2 of us left awake, and we get this movie, and we're like, oh, what's this? Dawn of the Dead. Never heard of it. We pop it in, we start watching it, and that scene with that zombie shambling out of that doorway and taking that huge bite out of the woman's shoulder, it's like, this is the movie. This is the movie that traumatized me. And from that moment on, I've loved zombies.
That's great. Ties it all together.
That's great. Yep. So now I'm crazy for like any zombie fiction, any like movies, anything. And now I love that that the 3 of us are adding to the zombie mythos with Junior Braves.
Is that your go-to zombie movie now? Is that like, has that made such a mark on you that like, has that become the quintessential zombie movie for you?
Oh yeah. The original Dawn of the Dead and, Night of the Living Dead. Also, I'm a big fan of the 90s remake of Night of the Living Dead, the one that Tom Savini directed, because that's actually the first one I saw. So that one also has a very special place in my heart, because I think it's a really good remake that doesn't get enough due.
Yeah, it's funny, like the zombie genre has kind of like some folks are like, oh, I don't want to touch zombies right now. Like after The Walking Dead, it's like, okay, that was like the heyday of zombies, like now they're on the decline, but there's still avenues to explore with it, like what you're doing with Junior Braves. It's like, no, well, now it's the young adult version of it. Like let kids get into the zombie genre or subgenre or whatever this way, and get them just scared enough that they'll be able to come back for more.
And it's interesting.
No, go ahead.
I was gonna say, like, talking about Romero and just like how there's a lot of different zombie stuff out there, but taking a look at the crazies, I think that book 1 of Junior Braves kind of has that vibe to it, where these kids come back to a town that has stuff going on and they don't know what's going on. And you've got all these, like, you don't know what to call them. Are they zombies? Are they mutant monsters? What are they? And it's much like that in that as well. In the movie The Crazies, it's kind of got that feel, I think, for our kids in Junior Braves.
Yeah, that's definitely in the DNA of Junior Braves.
I think also, every now and again at a convention, some guy will come up and I'll pitch him the book, and he'll say, I'm really over zombies. I don't want to read zombies anymore. And this is usually a guy who's like, in his 30s or like a little bit up. And he kind of like, there's this kind of like condescending look in his eyes. And it's like, well, okay, you don't have to read it. It's not for you. Like, I'm going to pitch it to you because I want to sell the book and make money. But like the demographic is a bunch of kids who haven't seen zombies before. The whole glut of zombie stuff that everybody kind of always talks about doesn't exist for those kids yet, because they aren't in the age group where that's appropriate. So to them, this is a whole new thing. We're introducing them to this genre that they've never encountered before.
That's a really good point, Zach. Like, they don't have the baggage that 30-year-old dude wearing, the Night of the Living Dead t-shirt has with it, or that 40-year-old dude with the Night of the Living Dead t-shirt. Where their biggest exposure is probably Plants vs. Zombies.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is an excellent thing to be exposed to.
Yeah.
But like, it's not, the zombie glut problem, or whatever you want to call it, doesn't exist for these kids. And we get to be the people who walk them through that, who show them what that is. That's incredibly gratifying.
Yeah, I mean, you just summed up the problem that fandom in general is facing right now. Like, it's not for you. Like, I saw a bunch of people shit all over the new Rise of the Ninja Turtles show that just came out on Nickelodeon. And I recognized, I'm like, all right, I watched it, and I'm like, all right, there were some parts I didn't like. I liked it overall, but then I looked over my kids. I have a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old, and they're just like wrapped, like just enthralled by this. I was like, oh, it's not for me, it's for them. Like, and I've shown them like the 80s Ninja Turtles cartoon, and they don't care at all about that. They're like, this isn't the Ninja Turtles. Show me the real Ninja Turtles. They like the new stuff. So it's like, all right, I could be offended by that and be like, you're not my son. You don't like the Ninja Turtles. Like, no, they do. It's just, there's one for a new generation, and that's the thing. Like that, and same thing for Star Wars and comics in general. Like, it's the same thing. It's not for you, dude. Like, you got yours. You had yours already. Now it's someone else's.
Yeah.
Yeah, fandom is kind of going through a weird phase right now where it's being forced to confront a lot of things, and it's not necessarily handling it well.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's going through some growing pains.
I mean, all the people that I personally and that I associate with are handling it fine. It's the people who are like kind of, like sitting in the back corners of the internet and getting angry on Twitter that are not doing so hot. It's always the minority of this stuff.
But I mean, it's now. I feel like over the past several years, like there is a renaissance in comics specifically, in that there's so many comics right now. So like it can be a little overwhelming, but there's so many good comics right now. So regardless of what you're into, there's something for you. And getting that understanding that it's like it's a medium, it's not a genre. That there's so much that anyone can find regardless of what you're into. If you like horror, obviously there's a ton of stuff, including Junior Braves, that you could check out, but if you like comedy, if you like drama, if you like anything sci-fi, there's something in there for every single person out there.
Yeah, they say comics are for everyone, and they are, but not every comic is for every person. But there's so many comics, you can find something for you. People get sort of weirdly invested, where it's just like, okay, you don't like that run on Thor? Stop buying it. Yeah. Buy another comic that you do like.
Another Thor run in 6 months anyway, so just wait.
Exactly.
Maybe you'll like the next one.
Yeah, try that. Maybe you'll like it.
There's no obligation to buy every single one.
Right. There's a teacher in the Chicago area named Rennell, I think his last name is Williams, who I did a panel with at C2E2 in this last year. And he said this really smart thing, which is that comics stand for access. It's not everyone is going to be able to do it well, but anybody who, has some degree of a secondary, even a primary education, so they can write, they can read, they can probably draw, at least a little bit, can make something like this. And that means that, anyone is able to be a part of this process. And it goes in reverse. Anyone can read these. So it is a very, in that way, democratic kind of entertainment. It doesn't require a lot of, at least anymore, it doesn't require a lot of initial understanding or homework to get involved in. And I think that makes some people angry who did all the homework back when it was necessary, and now feel like they've wasted their time. And I think it's just I think it's a good thing. I think a lot of these folks who disagree feel like they're being kicked out of a space that somehow belongs to them. And they aren't. They're just being told to make room for other people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and perhaps there's, and not to I feel like this is gonna be the cheesy closer line, but there are a few books as welcoming as something like Junior Braves, in that it is something that there is something in there for everyone that's even mildly interested in the horror genre. So I like one of you guys had pointed out, this is for someone that's a kid that may have not been allowed yet to read The Walking Dead, but wants to, or has, that's a really great sweet spot. I know I work with someone who has a 4 kids, and I've been kind of pushing comics her way. I'm like, oh, I got an extra one here. You go, and her kids just devour this thing, and her oldest son has been waiting for The Walking Dead. He's like, can I do it yet? Can I do it yet? And they've been I think he just turned 12 or 13, and they're like, I think you're getting there, close. They've read through the book, and they're like, I don't know. But now I gotta give them Junior Braves and go no, this is what you gotta get next. And that should be the nice midway point for them.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you.
So just to kind of wrap us up a little bit, where are the best places to find you guys online?
Well, there's the Junior Braves Facebook page, which is it's Junior Braves 65, right, guys?
Yeah, correct.
Mixed up.
Junior Braves 65.
Right. And I can be found at Lehner Zach on Instagram. That's where I'm usually most active.
And let's see, on Twitter you can find me at Mike is Ernie. As in Ernie from Sesame Street. Mike is Ernie. I also have my website, bymichaeltanner.com. And kind of hitting on the Facebook. We have the Facebook, and then the Junior Braves Instagram is just Junior Braves. And, yeah.
Let's see, you can find me at That Amazing Twit as my handle for Twitter and Instagram. And then you can find Junior Braves. You can find Junior Braves on Twitter at Junior Braves 65 at twitter.com, or Twitter as well. And then also GK Wordsmith is .com is my my website. And it's got all sorts of also Junior Braves acquainted stuff as well.
I like that you guys divided up the Junior Braves social handles, so you each handled one of those. That was...
Yeah, it tends to kind of show, like, the Instagram is pretty much me just posting photos at conventions I go to. We should probably really coordinate that better.
Guys, thank you so much for taking the time to chat at me. Chat with me. This is definitely not a one-sided conversation. Since I have kids of my own, I'm always looking for ways to introduce them to horror without traumatizing them and sending them into therapy down the line. So I'm slowly building this a pop culture timeline for them, or like syllabus for them. To be like, okay, you're now 5 years old, you can watch this movie now. Like you've unlocked this new, like you leveled up. So here's a new batch of pop culture to enjoy. So I gotta slot something like Junior Braves in for a few years down the line, so that way it's like, okay, this is how you get into this. And so far, they're into monsters and stuff like that. So I got them on the right track.
Nice. Good job, Dad.
Yeah.
All right, then. So that does it then for this episode of Funny Book Splatter. I have been James Ferguson with my guests Greg Smith, Michael Tanner, and Zach Lehner. You've been listening to Funny Book Splatter, a horror comics podcast brought to you by HorrorTalk.com. We've been bringing you the best in horror since 2002. In addition to comics, we cover movies, TV shows, books, and video games. We've got news, reviews, guest features, interviews, unboxing videos, and much more. Be sure to sign up to Steve's Deals newsletter to increase your horror collection without breaking the bank. Check us out at HorrorTalk.com and at HorrorTalk on Twitter.